We'll continue with logistic regression. We have seen how to create confusion matrix and also how to calculate accuracy, sensitivity, specificity. We'll also add on to this list. Today we are going to look at a curve called ROC curve, receiver operating characteristics curve. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll just try to see why we need to use logistic regression. Why not simply use multiple linear regression and use that? So we'll try to answer that question. And then we'll move on to a situation where we have multinomial logistic regression. So the data that we used last time, binary.csv. So we had student applicant who were applying to a graduate program, and they were admitted or not admitted based on their GRE, GPA, and the school where they were coming from. But the response had only two values: admitted, not admitted. What if we have like more than two classes for the response? So in that situation, like when we have two classes, it is binomial, and when it becomes more than two, we have a multinomial situation. So we are going to look at one example using ctg.csv file. So this is the confusion matrix, and you know that when the actual class is 0 and predicted class is 0, so that cell is a correct prediction. It's called true negative. And when both are 1, it's called TP or true positive. And off diagonal cells in a confusion matrix basically indicate error or misclassification error. So the model that we develop for classifying is never perfect. So those errors are captured in these cells. So this is false negative. So actually it should be 1, but incorrectly or falsely it predicts this class to be 0. So we have false negative. And this cell actually should be 0, but the predicted class falsely or incorrectly is 1. So this is like false positive. And using these cells, we can calculate accuracy as the total of the diagonal divided by the overall total. You add everything, so that gives you accuracy, how accurate your model is. And in fact, last time we calculated misclassification. So that's a opposite of accuracy. If you do 1 minus, you get misclassification. So if the model is accurate at the rate of 70%, so automatically that also means the model is misclassifying at the rate of 30%. And we also questioned whether accuracy of 80% is meaningful or not. And I showed you some examples where we had a situation where the model was doing almost a perfect job of classifying 0, but doing very badly for classifying 1. So accuracy may give you overall number, but it's always good idea to see what's happening within. So how the model is performing when classifying 0 or classifying 1. So sensitivity helps us in figuring out how often the model correctly classifies category 1. So we divide TP by the total of that column to get sensitivity. And same thing if we do with 0, true negative by the total of the column, we get specificity. So here is extreme situation. So suppose we accept all applicants. So we don't depend on the model, but let's say we decide that, okay, any applicant who applies, we just accept, which means in terms of probability, the chance of a student getting admitted has to be any number above zero. So that will lead to this situation where, let's say, if that is our model where we are accepting everybody, so 102 actually were admitted, and we are going to put 102 in this cell, which signifies correct classification, but all remaining will be misclassified and it falls here. So based on this, if you calculate accuracy, so 0 plus 102 and then divide by the overall total, you get 31.4%. Sensitivity 102 divided by 102. So this model correctly predicts all applicants belonging to class 1. And specificity, again, 0 divided by the total is 0%. So you can see nothing is classified correctly here. So this is one extreme. Other extreme is reject everything, which means accept only those candidates when probability of selection is more than 1, which is never going to happen because probability is never more than 1. So that is going to give us these accuracy and sensitivity and specificity numbers. And out of the two here, so basically if you look at first and second confusion matrix, the numbers that you see are number of student applicants in that category. So 223 students were not actually admitted and 102 students were admitted. So they belong to that category. And if you take higher of the two, so obviously 2 to 3, this number here, so number of applicants that belong to class 0, in this case is almost, not almost, actually more than 2 times. So that's a higher number. So whenever you calculate the percentage, so 223 divided by the total, and that you get as 68.6%. So that is your baseline rate. So any model that we build has to do better than the maximum of the 2 percentages. So the two numbers that we have, so there are 31.4% of the student belonging to category 1 and 68.6 student belong to category 0. So higher of the two is this number. So this becomes the baseline. That means we have to perform better than this if our model is of any use. If we apply logistic regression and if our model falls below this number, that only means that we should throw that model into maybe Pacific Ocean or Atlantic Ocean, whichever is nearest, because that model is of no use. So that's the baseline rate. We briefly talked last time also. Now, in between these two extremes, we could usually, like, we use a p-value which is 0.5, and we say if the probability of accepting an applicant is more than 0.5, then accept. And if it is less than 0.5, then reject. So usually 0.5 is the threshold that we use in terms of p. But it's not necessary. We don't have to use zero point 0.5. It's just most of the times it is the default number, but we can always play with different p values and see what happens. So that's what I have done actually in the next slide. I used the same model that we developed last time. So all these results are based on exactly same model. And all these numbers are based on the training data. So that cutoff value or threshold value for P, if we say whenever P is more than 0.6, only then accept an applicant. So that will change your confusion matrix and it is going to look like this. If you calculate accuracy based on this, 70.5%. But sensitivity, so note that when the p value is increasing, when you start increasing p value from 0.5 to 0.6 or even 0.7, 0.8, if you are moving towards 1, what exactly we are doing is we are giving less and less chance for an applicant to be selected because we are raising the bar. So if we say only accept those applicants who have probability more than 0.6, then obviously the number of students who will be classified as 1, that is going to be falling down. So that's why sensitivity is less, but specificity is 98.2. And so whatever impact we have on sensitivity, we will have opposite impact on specificity. Because now we are becoming, if we are becoming more strict, obviously most students will be rejected. And when most students are rejected, somehow your specificity is going to capture that. And these were the results that we had. So this is the same result that we had based on default value of 0.5. And when you decrease the bar, when you make it easier for a student to be admitted, so that's what will happen if we take our cutoff or threshold from 0.5 to 0.4. So with 0.4, if you calculate accuracy, it falls down, but look at sensitivity. So now it is capturing more and more student correctly in class 1. But specificity is going to go down. So this is the same model. We are not changing the model, the logistic regression that we had. It has the same intercept, same B1, same B2. So exactly same model, but the outcome based on confusion matrix can change if we change the threshold. So in some applications, it may be a good idea to explore beyond the default. So we should not just look at the default of p.5 and be satisfied, but it's a good idea to explore what if I increase it slightly? What if I decrease it slightly? Is it going to improve or not improve my accuracy? And especially sometimes we may have more interest in one specific class like 0 or 1 where we don't want to go wrong. So then it gives you a tool which can help you adjust your sensitivity and specificity in certain way. Like in this case, you can see it increases if you reduce the threshold value. But for specificity, it has the opposite impact. So depending on a situation, which one is more important, you can always make some adjustment. So luckily, we don't have to do this manually. Like making all possible confusion matrices for all possible cutoff and threshold values, and then calculating accuracy, sensitivity, specificity, it's going to be very, very tedious. And that's where computers can help. And one of the tools that is very useful is called ROC curve, receiver operating characteristics curve. And what it does is very simple. If you look at the first plot, on the y-axis we have sensitivity, and x-axis we have specificity. So y-axis goes from 0 to 100, but if you see specificity, it goes from 100 to 0. It goes in the opposite direction. And maybe in some books or even some softwares, you may find that instead of reversing the order, they plot the ROC curve in such a way that on x-axis they plot 1 minus specificity. But essentially it is going to have the same impact. The plot is going to look like this. Now there is a diagonal line. This diagonal line, so that's for your comparison. And the curve that you see, the ROC curve that we see in the red color, so that's based on different p-values. Now, if you have to identify, for example, at this point, what is the p-value? It's very easy. So you will see that, let me call this as point A. And let's call this extreme point B. So what is A? At A, our sensitivity is 0 and specificity is 100. So 0 and 100%. And if you go back to the situation where we had sensitivity as 0% and specificity as 100%, so that's when we are rejecting everything. P is greater than 1. So this is that value where P is greater than 1 situation. And obviously here your sensitivity is 100%, but specificity is all wrong. So that's where your P value is less than 1. So actually I used greater than 0, so it's the same thing, but let me be consistent. So you can also say P greater than 0. And all the points in between are different values of P. So if this is P0, then gradually P becomes 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, somewhere in the middle, and then it reaches 1. So the idea here is looking at this curve. Suppose you make a model and the curve is above the diagonal. So this middle line here. So if it is above the diagonal, we can say that our model is useful. Because diagonal is something like tossing a coin. So if you want to make a decision about applicants, you take each application, toss your coin, heads admit, tails reject, and continue to do that for each applicant. So that's the line here, this diagonal line. So no model. So obviously our model has to do better than that. And another metric that people use is called AUC. area under the curve. So area under this diagonal is obviously 50% or 0.5. And area under this curve, our curve for logistic regression, it is certainly more than 0.5 because it is above this diagonal line. So that's a good thing. But if you find another method, let's say you apply decision tree or you apply neural network or some other method for classifying applicants, you can easily plot the result of that classification also and compare like more than one method and see which method is doing better. So ROC curves can be really useful in those kind of comparisons also. So this area under the curve, for example, for our situation is 68.7%. So obviously it's more than the diagonal, more than 50%. So at least that's a good sign. And out of all the p values based on which our ROC curve is made, we can also find out what is the best value of p. So for example, here it says 0.3 and then also says what is the sensitivity and what is the specificity you'll get if you are using this cutoff. So compared to 0.5, which is the default, the method says that you can get the maximum sensitivity and specificity not at 0.5 but closer to 0.3. You can also figure out whether this is exactly 0.3 or maybe in 2 decimals or 3 decimals, you can get more accurate values also. One thing to note here is that the probabilities that we are talking about here for p, that's not the p value in statistical sense, like where we use p value of 0.05, reject null hypothesis, accept null hypothesis. So this is not that p value. This is just a probability that the student is accepted or not. So this is log p divided by 1 minus p, where p is the probability that a student will be admitted. Okay, so let's see this in R. I think last time we used all these libraries. The only extra library that I have this time is NNet. So that's the short form for neural networks. But we'll use this for multinomial logistic regression. So you can run this whole thing. And since I read the binary file, so binary file should still exist in our files folder. So if you run this, it should work fine. Let me type here str my data. So looking at the structure of the data, we had converted admit and rank into a factor variable. Okay, this should be data. And if we copy and paste this time for rank and run. So usually we should convert a variable into required format before we split the data. Otherwise, you may have to do it like 2 times. You have to do it for training data, then again you have to repeat for test data. So it's always a good idea to do it beforehand. So now if you look at str my data, so it is whatever format that we want. And we used 1234 set.seed. So I'm going to retain that, run everything. And then we had our logistic regression model. I think one of the variables was not significant. I can check again actually. Summary M. GRE was not significant. So I'm going to drop it. Minus GRE and run the model. So the next thing that we want to do is to develop a ROC curve. Now, just to reinforce what we did last time. So let's say for the confusion matrix, we made a prediction first. This P1, if you look at head P1, it contains P values. P means probability values. The probability that a student or applicant will be accepted or not. And if you make a histogram, HIST, just to understand how it looks. So you might notice that there are more values. See, 0.5 is somewhere here. 0.5 is somewhere here. So there are more values on the left side of this probability compared to the right side. And in fact, maximum P or probability is only 70%. So more values are on the left side means if your cutoff is 0.5, you are going to reject more candidates because you can see clearly the volume is more on the left side of 0.5 compared to right side. What we did was last time for confusion matrix, we created PRED1. We said if else. We used if else function. So if P1 is greater than 0.5, so this P1 is your P value. So if it is more than 0.5, then accept the applicant. Otherwise, reject. 0 means reject. This is what we had. And this is what gave us this table. Table of predicted. So predicted is our PRED1 and actual. So actual in your train data, train $admit. This is the table we got. So this is the confusion matrix when P is greater than 0.5. Obviously, it will not go beyond 1, but because the maximum is 0.7 only. Now, if you change this to 0.6 and run this, you see your confusion matrix changes. So this is how I arrived at those confusion matrices in the slides. And if I keep it 0.4, you get confusion matrix for cutoff or threshold 0.4. But then doing it with ROC curve obviously is much more smarter. Otherwise, we have to create this like one by one, do with 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. So that is going to take a lot of time. So we'll do the prediction as we had done earlier by running this line. And then we'll use a function called multiclass.roc. And what it needs as an input is your actual class, whether the student was admitted or not, and then this prediction P1, because it needs to create the curve, so it wants those values. And if you don't add percentage equals true, it will use decimal values. But if you say percentage equals true, then it is going to use percentage, which is much more user friendly. So let's store the output of this in R. So we are in a situation where our response is binary. Student is admitted, student is not admitted. So there are two groups. One group, a language that we use is controls group. So you can use admit values equals 0. So students who are not admitted as control group, and cases where students are admitted, you can use them as a cases. So usually the probability for this group is higher than the control group. That's how it is structured, and this is default. So we don't have to do anything, especially when we have two categories, we don't have to worry. Now this R contains a lot of information. We don't need everything. We just need the ROC curve. So I'm going to run this line and store the outcome in ROC. If you type ROC in your console and hit enter, it may give you some more information about what is contained, not the data, but the information. So it says that there are 223 controls. So basically students who are not admitted, 223 in the training data, and 102 are the cases where students were admitted. You can check that. Table my data dollar admit. Not my data actually, because we are using train. So we have to have train. So this 223 sample size comes from this. 102 sample size is contained here. Okay, now we have the ROC information, and I'm going to use this double square bracket and 1 to extract information from ROC and store it in R1, and then use that R1 to plot the ROC curve. So this is our ROC curve that you saw in the PowerPoint. You can always do things that we have done with other plots. You can use any color that you like. For example, if you want red, it will give you a red curve. Or if you want to make this line wider, line width LWD. So let's say 5. Or if you want to give a title, you can get a title. So this ROC curve I have made with training data, but there's no reason why you cannot repeat the same thing with test data. It can be done very easily. Let me also extend this slightly with more features. So R1, if you want a printout of AUC, area under curve, you can say print dot AUC. This is Boolean. Should the numeric value of AUC be printed on the plot? So if you select this and say true, it can print that. But I'm going to add some more features before I print this. Area under the curve dot polygon. So whether or not to display area as a polygon. So let's do that. You can also make a grid. So I'm just going to use some standard numbers. You can always modify and see what happens. And then those grids can have color. Grid dot color. So we can specify we want the grids to be green and red. Another feature we can add, do you want the max dot AUC polygon, the first one. So whether or not to display maximal possible area as a polygon. So let's say yes. AUC dot polygon color. So I used a specific color, light blue, in the slides. So let's try that, light blue. And if you remember on the slide, I also had the best p-value printed with sensitivity and specificity. So print dot thresh or threshold. So the text adjustment, character expansion factor, and color for the printing of AUC. So print dot thresh, we can say true. We can also give the main title. So if we run this, you get slightly better plot compared to the basic one. So this 0.3 that I was talking about, if you want the exact value for the best threshold, you can run it with coordinates like this, and it tells you that it is 0.3367. So it has only one decimal here, but if you want the exact one, this is what we have. If you simply run area under the curve, AUC R1, that also gives you the value. So this one is 68.7, like this one you get like 68.75, so one more decimal. What if I want to add one more line? I want to compare this with one more method. How should I add one more line? So we'll have to have a model for that. So I'm going to use, or let me copy and paste to save time. So I'm going to run the same model with slight change. So this time let's keep GRE, although it is statistically not significant, but just for the sake of comparison. And what else we are going to need? We did all these things. So I will just copy. So under the ROC curve, first 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll change R1 to R2, but let's first copy this. So this is all under second ROC curve. Okay. So run this, run, and this one I'm going to change to R2. We don't want to have same R1, so we do R2. So now we can say plot R2, and the extra thing you have to do in the plot is add equals true. So we can say that we want to add this to existing plot. So we have to say add equals true. And let's have a different color. So this one is black. We can have red. So you can see you have two curves in the same plot. So this way you can use the ROC curve to understand a model and how the threshold values affect sensitivity and specificity, and possibly like how you can make adjustment using the cutoff or threshold to arrive at a result that makes sense for your data or your application that you are doing. Like if you are more interested in one, then adjust or move it towards that. And if you are interested in like better specificity, then change your cutoff accordingly.
Hi, Professor. Just wondering why we have two rock curve in the graph. Supposedly we have one model but different cutoff points corresponding to different sensitivity and specificity. So why we have two instead of one curve?
What I did was for the second curve, I created a new model where I did not exclude GRE. So if you look at this line, the black line on the rock curve, so that is a model when GRE is not there in the model. And the red one is when GRE is also included. So all the variables are included. So because these two are different models, their rock curves may be slightly different. And how different? You can see there's a lot of overlap. Some cases the red curve is doing better. Some cases blue curve is doing or black curve is doing better. But I would say these are quite close. They are not very different. But your question is that why two curves with the same model? So the answer is no, we don't have the same model. We have two different models. By different model, I don't mean that one is logistic and other is random forest. But logistic model also can be like different from each other. So first model that we used did not include GRE and the red one includes GRE. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. So usually when we try to develop a classification model, you will come across many situations where not only two, but you may see 5, 10 curves plotted on the same plot for the comparison. But to keep it straightforward, you can also have like two curves side by side. If you don't want to have on the same plot, you can have one rock curve with first model and then another rock curve with the second model. I'm going to answer this question in visual way by making some plots. And the data that we have in this .csv file, so it's quite noisy. And especially for understanding concept, I would say it's not that clean. There's a lot of overlap. So same example in terms of like variables, but I want to create a new data, simulated data, which is much more cleaner and we can explain that more nicely. So for that, I'm creating a GPA. So GPA variable has 500 values. You can think of like 500 applicants who have GPAs between 3 and 3.6. So this is a uniform distribution. So let's run this. In the console, if you type HIST and simply visually see what is this. So you are getting random numbers between 3 and 3.6. And we are using uniform distribution. R is random and UNIF stands for uniform. So we have got 500 samples between 3 and 3.6 GPA. And later on, I'm going to call this group as a reject. So these candidates who are rejected. And then I want to add 500 more data points to the original GPA. But this time, I'm drawing numbers between 3.4 and 4. So purposefully, I have done some overlap here. So 3.4 and 3.6. So definitely there is an overlap between the two. because in real data also, like, we don't have a very clean separation, because if there's a very clean separation, classifying is not really a problem, and sometimes we don't even need any model. So it becomes challenging only when there's overlap. So I try to replicate that little bit, not too much also, and then we go up to 4 here. So if you run this and look at histogram of GPA, so this is the overlap part, and mainly these students are rejected, these students are accepted. So that's the situation. We are going to save number 0 in outcome. So what was the outcome of application process? So 0 means the candidates were rejected. So 500, so first 500 values we are rejecting, and then again using the same function append, we are adding on to 500 zeros. Now we want to add 500 ones, which will represent the students or applicants were accepted. So now we have like independent variable as well as dependent variable. So our data or simulated data has 1000 applicants, 500 accepted, 500 rejected. Students who were accepted, they have GPA values between 3.4 and 4. Students who were rejected, they have GPA values between 3 and 3.6. So that's the situation. So now let's create a data frame with these two columns. If you want to look at the structure of this data, which we have named as data, if you run that, so GPA and then outcome, but outcome, we do not want that variable to be numeric, just like admit. We want to convert this into factor. So we should do that. So this is going to help us convert this into a factor variable. Before we make any model or whatever, let's plot it. So we use this data and we put a GPA on x-axis and outcome on y-axis, and we are creating a box plot. So this is how the box plot looks like. So you'll see that there is some overlap. So lower tail of students admitted and upper tail of students not admitted. So they are not like separate, there is an overlap. Now if you use GPA and outcome and try to make a scatter plot the way we used to do for multiple linear regression, you will get this picture, because outcome values are only between, actually not between, but there are only two values. It's a binary situation. So you have number 0 and number 1. So we can say stat underscore smooth, and the method we are using is lm, and run this. Let me make a small change here. I will go back and I'm going to mute this factor for the time being, because for multiple linear regression, the outcome should be a numeric value. We cannot use a factor variable for multiple linear regression. So if we run everything such that the outcome is still numeric, so either 0 and 1, but still it is numeric. So that will give us this plot. We can remove the confidence band by saying standard error is 0. If you want to highlight the blue line width, let's increase to 5, make it thick. What will happen if we use multiple linear regression is highlighted by this plot. So what is going to happen is very simple. Remember, our outcome is a value 0 and 1. And the prediction that we want to make is, let's say somebody has a GPA of 3.5 here. So how do we make a prediction? You go draw a vertical line and go to the blue line and then go to the outcome. And the outcome is about 0.5. So there is a 50% chance, 0.5 probability that this candidate who has a GPA of 3.5 will be admitted based on multiple linear regression model. But how about 3.75? So probability should increase, right? So if somebody has a GPA of 3.75, so you go up and hit this blue line and go to the left, and the probability is 0.8.9. So 90% chance of that student getting admitted. So that's a good thing. If your GPA is increasing and this model says that the probability is also going up, so that's what we want. Our model should do that. So anyone sees any problem here with this linear regression model? Why not use this to make a prediction or classification that the candidate should be accepted or not? So what's wrong with this model?
Lots of false negatives, like you have all those points below 0.5, probability less than 0.5 that we're gonna not admit, but they should have been admitted.
But that's going to happen with any data. This candidate, for example, who has 3.3 and the probability is even less than 0.4, in fact 0.2. So that candidate should be rejected. And actually that candidate was rejected. But obviously there's some overlap, but overlap is going to happen with real data. Actually, there will be more overlap. So some misclassification is bound to happen. So that's not really a problem, because that will happen with any model. As long as we have incomplete information, in the sense that we never have data on entire population. We work with sample, and sample is just part of the population. So with sample, we cannot have like 100% accurate results.
The result is not bound within 0 to 1.
Okay, so the probability, because I was interpreting this line as a probability by going on y-axis. But you are right. What if somebody is 3.1 GPA? You go to the blue line and suddenly you have a negative value. You cannot say that the probability of somebody getting accepted is negative 0.23, because probability cannot be negative. Similarly here, if you have values close to 4, your y-axis is above 1. So the probability cannot be 1.9 or 2 that somebody will be accepted. So interpretation also becomes a problem. And another thing is like this representing a class with 0 or 1. This is arbitrary. We just choose to do that in that way. It has no meaning actually. And especially when you have like 3 classes. So what you call first class or second class or third class, it could be something that depends on the person who is building the model. So one person builds a model, they may call first class as X1, second class as X2, and third class as X3. But somebody else may use second class as X1. So the order has actually no meaning. Now, what will happen if we use the logistic regression that we have been using? So if I try to do the same thing, so let me use logistic to store a logistic regression model. So GLM, this is what we have been using, outcome. But before that, let me check if str data, because I removed that factor thing. So now we do need this as a factor. So I will, in fact, we can copy and paste. Do it here. Outcome as a function of GPA, where our data is called data and the family is binomial. So we store this model in logistic, and since we have the model, we can make some predictions. So let's store within PRED. So I'm storing basically the probabilities of the logistic regression. So this PRED has probability values. You can check head PRED. These are predictions using this simulated data, and then the pipe control shift M, and we want ggplot aesthetics. On x-axis we are putting GPA, and y-axis this time we'll put the predictions. GEOM point for the scatter plot. So let's say alpha equal 0.05. So if you want the points to be transparent, line width thicker, color blue. Instead of that line, now we have this curve. We can add those data points also. So we can have another GOM point, aesthetics, where x is equal to GPA, and on the y-axis we want outcome, because for scatter plot we want a numeric outcome. So 1 2 3 1 2 3. That it doesn't like that. Because we are trying to do two different things. One place we are trying to use outcome as a factor, and in the same plot we are trying to do it as a numeric. So it may create some difficulty. So I'm going to rerun the data generation part and come back to this plot.
As dot numeric of outcome, yeah, that seems to work too. Got it.
Okay. So this is what I was looking for. So compared to the earlier plot, you will notice that now the values do not go below 0 and above 1. So we have this nice S-shaped curve, and we get this curve because we are using the log odds model or logistic regression model, where our y is log p divided by 1 minus p. So that transformation is helping us in getting a prediction that is more interpretable, because we want a response, like people want to have the response in such a way that it can be used in terms of probability, and logistic regression actually allows that to happen. Multiple linear regression or linear regression creates a problem because interpretation in terms of probability doesn't work out. That's the reason we should use logistic regression, one of the reasons. So this is the example that I showed you, and I made these plots to highlight that this will be incorrect, especially like the problems it creates here. whereas when your response variable is factor, so this one tackles logistic regression, tackles that much more meaningfully. And you get something that you can interpret and understand. Now coming to situation where our response has more than 2 levels. So when we have more than 2 levels, instead of binomial, that's a multinomial situation. And when that response, obviously we are talking about response which is a factor variable. So when we have a factor at more than 2 levels, we use multinomial logistic regression models. The data which we are going to use is called CTG data. You can download that ctg.csv file. What it contains is measurement of fetal heart rate and UC features on CTGs. And we have data on 2,126 cases. And their diagnostic features were also measured. So there were many independent variables. And these CTGs are classified by 3 experts. And then you arrive at the classification label. So whatever is your response or outcome, you say that it belongs to normal category or suspect or pathologic category. So this is based on assessment of 3 experts. Now the purpose of developing a classification model will be that if you have a good model, and especially when there is a situation where a lot of work is there and these experts are obviously sometimes they may not be available. So how can you use a model that gives you high classification accuracy? So if there is a patient who is normal, the model should be able to classify that accurately. And same thing for suspect or pathologic. So these are 21 features or what we call independent variables, IVs. And the response here is NSP. So that's the code. N is normal, S is suspect, P is pathologic. So using this data, we can make multinomial logistic regression model. Now, before we make a model, let's look at probability equations that we saw for a situation which is binomial. So now we have 3 cases. So with 3 classes, you will not have one equation, but you are going to have 2 equations. So one will be log P2 divided by P1. So P2 is obviously probability that the patient is suspect, and P1 is probability that the patient is normal. So log odds basically indicate that the chances that a patient is suspect compared to normal. So that's one equation. And another equation is P3 by P1. So log odds where you are comparing P3 with P1. So using those two, if we take exponential of both sides, we get P2 by P1 equals e raised to y1. And same thing with P3 by P1 e raised to y2. If you add these two, the way we have done here, you get this equation. And remember that the total probability is always 1. So using that fact, you can solve for P1 very easily. So because P1 is denominator and numerator is P2 plus P3, so P2 plus P3 can be replaced with 1 minus P1. And then when you solve for P1, you get this equation for probability. Similarly, you can calculate probability that patient will be suspect using this formula, and probability that the patient will be pathologic using this formula. So each one of them use y1 and y2. So y1 is your regular equation like b0 plus b1 x1 plus b2 x2 and so on. And same thing with y2. So this time you are not going to get one equation but two equations. And that happens because we have three classes. So when you run a model, so I have given this example here. So you have one equation for when a patient is suspect. 2 means suspect and 3 means pathologic. So what we do in multinomial logistic regression model is that we have to provide a reference. Like if there are three classes, if the patients can be in any one of the three classes, we have to first tell the model what is your reference level. So in this case, because the equation contains 2 and 3, so that is because I have given 1 as a reference level. So you can see P1 is in the denominator for both equations. So whatever you are getting is with reference to P1. So that's why you don't see a row for 1. So for example, if this is the coefficient for AC, so the format is slightly different. In logistic regression with binomial situation, we had all the coefficients and then all the standard errors, all the z values, and then the p values and whether they were significant or not. But here, because we have two equations, you will see that the output is slightly different. So you have coefficients and then you have standard errors. But the idea is for variable AC, coefficient is negative 830.3. So what it means is that if AC changes by 1 unit or AC increases by 1 unit, the log odds of a patient being 2, the log odds of a patient being suspect compared to a patient being normal, because that's the baseline, normal is the baseline. So log odds of a patient being suspect compared to a normal patient is going to decrease by 830.3356. Similarly, this is a positive value, so similar interpretation. If FM increases by 1 unit, that means log odds of a patient being suspect or 2 compared to a normal patient, that's going to increase by 6.86. So log odds are going to increase by that much amount. And if you are here, so that means if you increase FM by 1 unit, the log odds of a patient being pathologic compared to normal patient increases at a slower rate. You can see 1.3. So log odds are slightly lower, but there is an increase. So compared to this, the log odds are less when you are comparing 3 with 1. When you have standard errors, so you know that when you divide coefficients by the standard error, that gives you z values. For logistic regression, you get z values when you divide coefficients by the standard errors. In binomial situation, so basically your column of coefficients divided by standard error will give you the next column. And using those z values, you can calculate the p-value and figure out whether something is significant or not. So that's what we have done here. We have done two-tailed z-test. We calculate z-value. So the model is in M. So within summary M, if you put a dollar sign and pick up the coefficients, so basically you are getting this, and then divide by summary M dollar sign by the standard errors. So that will give you your z values, and you can calculate the p value very easily. So probability normal distribution, and this is what you get. Now the thing is, like, for each variable you have two p-values. So AC, the first p-value is very small, like almost 0. So AC is statistically significant. If you look at the second one, 3.5 times 10 to the power of negative 13. So 0.0000, like 12 zeros and then 3559. But that's also like a very small number, so that is also statistically significant. For FM, first one is significant, first coefficient is significant, but second one is not. So in these situations where one coefficient for the same variable is significant and the second one is not, or vice versa, so the decision we have to make is like whether we should drop that variable or include that in the model. So the answer is that we should include that in the model, because we cannot drop that model. It is just one variable. We cannot like drop it for 3 when we are comparing it with 3 versus 1, and keep it for when we are doing comparison of 2 versus 1. So we cannot do that. So we have to keep if any one of them is statistically significant. So once you arrive at a model that you are comfortable with whatever logic you have used, like statistically significant or practical significance. For example, AC has a lot of significance. I don't know, we have to check statistical, but compared to FM, you see it has a huge impact. 830, 726 and so on. DP also has a huge impact, especially like 3 versus 1. So the value is more than 1000. FM has little bit. So once you decide that, okay, this is my model, then how do you write the equation? So this is log P2 by P1, and then you use the intercept. So that's the value, minus 830.33 times AC plus 6.8686 FM minus and so on. So that gives you the first equation, which is like, I have used Y1 for this. And then using the second line, you can have equation log odds P3 by P1, which is your Y2. So if you have to find a probability, you have to first calculate Y1 and Y2 and plug in those values in the equation for probability, and then calculate what is the probability that a patient will be normal, what is the probability that patient will be suspect or pathologic. So that can be done, but we don't usually do that manually, because the calculations are very simple, but it is tedious. And you can use R certainly for getting the calculation done quickly. And you can imagine like multinomial situation where you have output with maybe 10 levels or 15 levels. So the calculations can become more and more tedious. And then using the outcome, finding confusion matrix, you can get it very easily. And the function that I'll be using that not only gives you the confusion matrix, but gives you accuracy, sensitivity, specificity, and many other things. But these are the most important ones. Accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity are usually more referred to. You can do the same thing with test data. For multinomial slides 10 to 16 that I showed you, we need a ctg.csv file. So you'll have to download and then upload. So I'm going to click on upload, browse. I think it is under my download files, CTG. Okay. So gets uploaded, 176.8 kilobytes. We'll read this into my data. So usually it's a good idea to look at the structure of my data. So I showed you actually one slide where I listed all the variables. So when R reads it, it automatically tries to detect what is the type of variable. So integer or numeric. NSP, we know that is not really integer. 1, 2, 3 are actually factor variables. We should use it as a factor. So I'm going to say my data $NSP factor my data $n second one. So we run this and I'm going to look at structure again just to confirm. So that works fine. Now before we do multinomial, I mentioned to you that we have to say which one is our reference level. So I'm going to use one normal patient as a reference. So we want to compare a suspect patient versus normal and pathologic versus normal. So reference is 1. So this is what is going to do that. So again, you should do this before you split the data. Otherwise, you have to do it manually both for training and testing data. So we'll create a train test just like we did earlier. Run 80/20, that should work. And for multinomial model, we are going to use multi-NOM. NSP versus everything else. So you run that. Within no time, the algorithm converges and stops after about 100 iterations. And if you do summary of M, you get the output for all the coefficients and all the standard errors for all the variables. You know, we can approach any problem in so many different ways. I'm going to approach this slightly differently. We can look at p-values, but before I do that, let's look at the absolute values. And you'll find that the change in log odds related to LB is quite small. This is also quite small. In terms of practical significance, I would say they are too tiny. So I'm going to pick and choose those ones which have large impact on the outcome. We can always test whether our strategy works or not by looking at accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity. But let me try this. So I'm going to ignore LB because impact on response seems to be very limited. So the first one I'm going to use, in fact, let me remove dot. So I will use AC, like big numbers. We can keep FM, at least they are in double digits. UC definitely. DL, DS, again the impact is not that much. DP we can keep. So that's what I did in the PowerPoint slides. I just kept the big hitters. And if you run the model and look at the summary, so this is what you saw in the PowerPoint. And then when you do z-test, you find that whatever we selected are also statistically significant. So that also supports to some extent our values. Now we can do the prediction and store it in P. If you want to check what is inside P, what exactly it is predicting, so head P. So basically it is predicting class, because we are saying class here. So first candidate, sorry, not the candidate, patient is predicted to be suspect, and remaining 5 out of first 6 are expected to be normal. You can check that using head train $sign NSP. So you can see the model is correct for first 4 patients, but these 2 have been misclassified. Like model says normal, but they were actually pathologic. They were in bad shape, and model feels they should be normal. So some inaccuracies do exist. This is for train. So using this, I can do confusion matrix. So I'm using a function now. Instead of like manually doing the calculation, we can use a function in caret. We have used this in the past also to create a confusion matrix. And what you need to supply is the p value that you calculated, the predictions, and actual, NSP.
Yes, so basically you compare 2 models, right? One versus all the variables, and then you cherry pick the variables. And then between both models, the model with the cherry pick variables have a higher AIC. Can you justify why?
Oh, so you are saying when we had multi this NSP with all the variables, right? And the data was trained, and when you looked at the summary, so you are looking at AIC, which is 827.94 versus this model that we just ran with only 5 variables, and it has a higher AIC. I think that's your question, right?
Yes.
So this one has a higher AIC and this one has a lower AIC. So I'm not suggesting that this model is better than this or the first model is better than this. So I'm just showing like one more way one can approach it. So AIC definitely is a criteria which we like to minimize. But it's also interesting to see what happens with accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity. These are multiple metrics, and sometimes they may not go together. So that also can happen. I cherry picked some like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables, which I suggested has like a bigger impact on the response or log odds compared to others. So I know like sometimes people talk about statistical significance versus practical significance. So a variable may have a statistically significant impact, but that impact may be so small that very often people like to drop that from the model. So that also happens from time to time. So I just use one approach, but I'm not suggesting that this is the best method. Like same data can be analyzed in so many different ways. Now, what can decide for us? Sometimes we may be interested in like nice statistical properties, and sometimes depending on like who is using it, may be interested in better sensitivity or specificity or accuracy. One way to like choose this way or that way is do the confusion matrix or do the ROC curve and see which method gives you, because these are like AIC and deviance, etc. Definitely give a direction. But as an analyst, we can also bring our own judgment. We can also like sometimes I have seen people ignoring statistical significance for a specific variable. Also like otherwise, like it may not be statistically significant, but I have seen people including that variable in the model for some practical reasons. So in statistics, that's what happens. Like there's no one solution. You can approach it in so many different ways. And ultimately, what is the purpose? If the purpose is to minimize AIC, then I would say the first model is better. But if the purpose is to maximize accuracy, then we have to also look at the confusion matrix and see which one is giving better accuracy. So that way it can be compared. So does that answer your question?
Yep.
Or confuses everybody more?
Yeah, it just goes to show how subjective it is when we want to choose the best model.
Yeah. So it is definitely like as a modeler, you may have to make some decisions from time to time, as long as you have the reason for justification for why you are doing this or why you are doing that, and it makes sense. So there is no one right answer. There is no one right answer. If you are competing, let's say on Kaggle.com, and every extra accuracy percentage moves you ahead of like 10 people. So at that time, if that gives you a higher AIC, so that may not worry you, because now it is moving you on the ladder ahead of 10 other competitors. It depends sometimes on what you are doing and what your goal is. Coming to the confusion matrix, you notice that it's not allowing me because it needs a package called E1071. So I'm going to install that right now. Let's go at the top, add one more line. (1071). So once it stops, we can run this line. So now it has done. So I'm going to run this line and go back at the bottom and then get the confusion matrix. So this is what you had earlier in the PowerPoint. So it calculates accuracy. What is accuracy? 1286 plus 91 plus 59 divided by, let me see how many in the training data, 1718. So that's your accuracy. It also gives you 95% confidence interval. If you like randomly choose, like we use set.seed of 1, 2, 3, 4. If you use something else, your accuracy levels may fluctuate, but this is the 95% interval. There is a number called no information rate. So this is the baseline. So look at the highest category in terms of number of samples. So that's the normal people, normal patients. So if you take 1286 and divide by the total, let me do that. 1286 and the training data has 1718. So 0.7485. So that's the number, 78.46. So on your ROC curve, your model, your model has to be useful and be above that diagonal line, it has to perform better than this. So your model is doing 83%. So that's not bad. So that means it's doing better than not having a model. And other thing you will notice is that the model is doing quite well for class 1, 95% accuracy, but class 2 only 40%, class 3 only 40%. So you can get a lot of information out of this and copy paste. Same thing for test. I'm going to reuse p values. We already got confusion matrix, so we can reuse this. And this is test. So run this and then you get it for the test data. So very consistent, I would say. Overall accuracy was 83.5 and now it is 81.3. So not that much overfitting going on. So we have this model. So let's store this in M. So this is the model with all the variables and AIC was lower. So we can do a quick comparison. So confusion matrix. So definitely accuracy has gone up. So 90.69%. So including all the variables, instead of using just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because there are 21 variables, independent variables, and we had used only 5. So using everything, many of them may not be statistically significant, but using everything gives us 90%, 90.6%. And sensitivity also is good actually, 95, 66 and 81. So it is consistent with the direction of AIC. Test data. Slightly low, from 90 it goes to 88, but still better than only 5 variables in the model. So I will do one last thing and then we can stop. So the ROC curve that we did for binomial situation, it's tricky for multinomial situation. So usually that concept is more for 2 classes. But sometimes people, because once you get familiar with ROC curve, so many times people show a lot of interest in how to get it for multi-class situation. So there are many ways you can approach that. There is no hard and fast rule. Some people may say that you can do one class versus others. So normal versus everything else, or suspect versus everything else, or pathologic versus everything else. Or you can do only maybe 2 at a time. You can do how the ROC curve looks with normal versus suspect, or you can compare suspect versus pathologic and like that. But at a time you can only do like 2 comparisons between two classes only. We do need probabilities for that, just like what we did earlier. Predict. So whichever m we have. So let's go with the first one with all variables. So predict m, and this time I'm going to do with the test data. So I mentioned earlier also ROC curve you can do for either train or just like confusion matrix. You can do it for train data, you can do it for test data, you can do it for both. But usually if we have more than one model, I highlighted that in the previous class also, when you have like several models to choose from, you choose the model where the performance is best using test data, not using the train data. When we try to choose a model, we make use of test data. Okay, so for type, we are going to use this time probability because we need probabilities and store that in P. And if you do head P, in the console, you see that there are now 3 columns. And if you want to do head test $NSP, so in the test data, first patient belongs to group 1, and you can see the probability is 99.99, etc. So very high probability that this patient is normal, and the probability for suspect or the probability of this patient being pathologic is very, very tiny, almost 0. So first 3 patients, all 3 probabilities are high in column 1. Fourth patient, so actually that's correct because this is 3 and the third probability is 96%. And the next candidate or patient, so that's good. And last one is belonging to second category, but the model says that the probability that it should belong to normal category is the highest. So only one misclassification out of first 6. But in any case, now we can use this P and we can store in R. So we used a multi-class dot rock test $NSP, and then we supply probabilities. And earlier also we said we want percent to be true. So we run that and extract rock values, or I would say R's. So RS. So we are extracting from this R 2 square brackets and within quotes ROC. So run that. If you run RS, like just for curiosity, just simply type RS and run. It doesn't give you anything. So it doesn't print anything. Now let me store in R1 RS 2 square and 1. Let me run this and see what we get.
It's ROCS.
Oh, this one, yeah, it should be rocks. Okay, thank you. Okay, so if I type RS, yeah, so it has a lot of information. So if we take the first one and run this and check what is within R1. So there are 2 values. One is when 307 controls. So those values in class 1, which is normal, greater than class 2 values. But what we want is actually it's a reverse order, because probabilities in class 2 should be usually like higher. we can go for the second one. And if you want the second one, 2 square brackets and 2. We can do R2 same way, RS2, and there also we can go for the second value. And R3, I will show you like what is inside. RS3, 3 and second value. So for example, after running this, as an example, if you run this, so 32 control cases compared to 307. And if you run this, 32 control cases compared with 69. So where that number is coming from, actually it may be easier to see using this table test $NSP. Like how many cases are there in category 1, how many in 2, how many in 3. So if you run the first one, you will notice that it is comparing these 69 versus 307. So class 1 and 2. If you run the second one, R2, it is comparing 32 versus 307, which means classes 1 and 3. And this should be second and third. So 32 versus 69, which is second and third. So we can say plot dot rock R1. Let's say color, because we have 3 curves, we may have to have different colors. Again, like this is something which is I would say research under progress, work in progress. Nobody has come out with a solid method actually to handle multi-class rock curves. I'm just giving you one approach, but this is still under works. Even this package that I'm using, they put a disclaimer that this is a work in progress. So blue, let's use red. So I'm not giving the titles right now just to save time, but you can always give a title. So the first one is blue. So this blue rock curve is for normal versus suspect. Red one is for normal versus pathologic. And green one is for pathologic versus suspect, second and third. So you can see that among the 3 comparisons, red one is doing the best. The ideal thing will be to have a straight line here, vertical line and straight horizontal line. So that is the ideal situation. Area under the curve will be 100. So the closer you are to that right angle, better your model. So this model is performing well when comparing class 1 with class 3. So normal and pathologic, it's not getting confused too much, but other 2 categories, there is little bit of confusion. So that was additional thing apart from the confusion matrix. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. Thanks very much for listening. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Professor. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Bye.
Bye. Good night.